I've been telling you on the show to be paying attention to Michigan State. Head coach Robyn Fralick is here to make the case herself. Lots to get into. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm your host, Howard Megdal, and I want to thank you for making us your first listen every day. Over 170,000 of you showed up in December alone. The way we show up for you 6 days a week, we are on pace to break that here in January. The numbers just keep going up because we are all here about the sport that we care about. And it's not just me, it is the entire group over at thenexthoops.com. We have over 100 reported pieces every single month on the past, present, and future of women's basketball. Make sure you're subscribing. Get it all right to your inbox. Every time there's a new pod, it's right in your inbox. Every time we report breaking free agency news, it's in your inbox. $9 a month, $72 a year, thenexthoops.com. And so we've spent a lot of time on the Big Ten, which has grown to, Coach, what do you have 37 teams in the Big Ten starting next year? Is that right? Do I have that number right?
Something. Yeah, that's close.
It's been incredible, but that means that sometimes teams get overlooked. And Michigan State in your first year cannot, should not, and if I have anything to say about it, will not be overlooked. So we're going to be talking in segment one about your pathway to get there. In segment two, we're going to get nerdy and talk about some of the numbers because, gee, this looks a lot like a certain Bowling Green team that I saw last year. And so I don't think that is any coincidence. But I want to start with your background. You are a Michigan product, I know. Take me through your discovery of the love of basketball.
So interestingly, I'm from East Lansing area, born and raised here, so it's quite a blessing to be back. But interestingly, in my family, I'm actually the only person who plays basketball. So my dad was an All-American swimmer in high school. My brother played baseball and golf. He still plays golf a lot. And for whatever reason, it was basketball was my love. And I started playing in third grade down at the Lansing Salvation Army. Actually, Javier Cavazos was my first coach. He was at our game the other night against Maryland, so it was awesome to see him. And I loved it. I kind of found a passion for it early. And so it's kind of always been mine. I don't feel like I grew up with kind of everyone telling me what to do or how to do it with basketball. I kind of carved my path and was fortunate to play at Davidson College. And then from there, I actually had no idea I was going to coach. But when I finished playing, I had a really good internship that summer out with a sports marketing company. And I just missed basketball so much. So got into coaching right after that. And here we are.
It's so interesting when you talk about not kind of knowing what that path is. And I feel like, so we're contemporaries. And so I think about that time where like Title IX was the given. We've never lived in a time without Title IX, but understanding what the professional path is beyond Title IX is something that's very much a live concern, something that is really being, quite frankly, still litigated to this day. And so you went to sports marketing, but like, did you have gee, this is my go-to? If somebody had said to you right out of Davidson, this is going to be my profession, what would you have said?
I would have probably thought they were crazy. I knew I loved it. I knew even when I was playing and I was out doing a sports marketing internship, I still always found somewhere to play. I kind of always had this path and passion to basketball. It was something that was just part of my daily life. But the coaching path, I don't think I understood it. I don't think I had a real context of what that would mean. My passion for basketball kind of kept bringing me back to it.
It's so interesting. You talk about how you were kind of late to that discovery. And for those at home who may not know, you're on the staff at Appalachian State, Western Michigan, Toledo, but we have to talk about Ashland University and the run you had there. My favorite stat is that during the period from 15-16 through 17-18, your record was 104-3. How disappointing were those 3 losses?
I laugh because that's all anyone asked me about. And I remember them all really well, very, very vividly. But I was really fortunate I coached a great team, credible players, great support for women's basketball. And at that time, I was an assistant before that for 7 years as a Division II assistant for Sue Ramsey. And I know that you had mentioned Title IX, and she was a real trailblazer for Title IX and really sort of broke down, opened up a lot of avenues for me and for the young women we got to coach. So I feel like my appreciation really went up working for someone like Coach Ramsey, of just the fight that had gone into the opportunities we got. And I was just, if you get to know Coach Ramsey, he's probably the happiest coach in America, and coaching, we're sort of can be on the emotional spectrum and, find a lot of things wrong. And she was just the opposite. She just had such a joy for what she did. So I think so much of who you become is who you kind of learn under. So I was really fortunate to learn under somebody who just loved what she did every day.
It is absolutely significant. And the fact that we talk about this all the time, just internally at the Nets, that these Title IX pioneers who were with us, people who are in many ways present at the creation for so much of women's sports, and obviously specifically women's basketball, telling those stories matters. So I'm so glad you brought her up. I do have to point out, and again, this gets into some things we're going to talk more about in segment 2, but at Ashland in 2017, 2018, you can go look and see number 1 in assist to turnover ratio. You guys are top 5 in the country in taking care of the basketball and distributing the basketball. It's a thing that serves as a statistical through line for everywhere you have been a head coach. What are basic principles that you learned there that you have taken into your coaching? Because it's happened everywhere you've gone, and it's happened immediately, which is the part that blows my mind.
Well, ball movement and player movement lead to good basketball. So I think wherever you coach, and interestingly too, at Ashland, at BG, and at Michigan State, we have changed and tweaked what we've done offensively. It hasn't been just a carbon copy of at each spot. We've had to adjust according to the personnel and the level of what's more effective. But I think ball movement and player movement at any level is good offense. And something we do a lot in every program I've coached is we just talk a lot about a good shot and a bad shot. And it's not personal, and it's not an attack. It's funny. It's sort of like parenting, just being consistent and making sure every time, you're consistent with what's a good shot, what's a bad shot. That's in practice, that's in film. And what's a good shot and what's a bad shot looks a little different for each player too. And you earn the right for some of those shots to be good shots. So I think that's been a big part of kind of the consistency you've seen with assist to turnover ratio and high assists. And I just think good passing teams are harder to guard.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a whole team that you have to guard and that you feel accountable to defensively, you're harder to guard. So we try to work really hard at playing team basketball.
I'm going to have to adopt this, obviously, for parenting, to your point. I'm going to have to talk about the difference between good bedtime and bad bedtime, and see, because you made it sound so simple. And I just have to point out, and maybe this is something for me to say instead of you, but just as a point of personal privilege, I talk to so many coaches. They talk about the difference between good shots and bad shots. That is a very common thing to be talked about. Your teams live it. Your teams do it every single time. So again, the messaging is not just consistent, but it also gets through. So, we've seen that here. We've seen it at Bowling Green, that run to I think it was called the Fab Four, not the Final Four of the WNIT, but, functionally the semifinals for it. We've seen it throughout. And then, bringing this to Michigan State in a conference that it's the toughest conference in America. I don't think anyone can really argue that is something really significant. So we're going to get into your Spartans tenure, what you've done this year, and what's ahead in segment 2. But first, Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by BetterHelp. As we enter 2024, what are some things you want to keep the same about yourself? And what are some things that maybe you want to work on? Right around New Year's, we get obsessed with how we change ourselves, but part of what we're doing is just expanding on what we're already doing right. And one of the ways in which we identify what those things are is therapy. So BetterHelp gives you an opportunity to do this work on yourself. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Here's how it works. You fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel. And so the NFL season is into the playoffs. It's no longer the season for the Cowboys or for the Eagles, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, and you're able to do so with no risk to you. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Use them on everything, over, under, same game parlays. You just find the different bets in the new Explore tab. Go to fanduel.com/locked on and make that first bet today. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Back with Michigan State head coach Robyn Fralick. And so take me through that moment you arrive at Michigan State and how quickly you thought you could turn this team into the type of team that you have become, and the consistency of it. And again, a team that first of all is a joy to watch for all the reasons we talked about. Ball movement is great offense. It's also very aesthetically pleasing offense, but just to do it so fast, is this where you thought you'd be on day one in year one?
I had no idea. I had no idea. And it's interesting because when I took over at Bowling Green, our third season, we went from literally last to first. So our second year, we'd finished last in the league. And our third year, we won the league. So we had a complete turnaround. And I get asked all the time, oh, did you know? No, I have no idea, right? You kind of have no idea when things stick or when there's a breakthrough. But what I do know is that me and my staff, we're fortunate we've worked together for a long time. And there's a plan and an organizational system for how we teach and what we teach and how we implement it. And fortunately, taking over at Michigan State, we also had a lot of players returning with experience. And Big Ten, a team that had been a pretty high assist team. So it wasn't like we were going from a all ISO team to trying to get us to learn to pass and share it. So there had been some, built-in overlap to an extent. And I think our staff we have a plan and we stick with it. And you just don't know when the breakthrough will happen. But I do know that if you are consistent and clear and have reasons for what you do, and you kind of connect the dots and kids understand it, at some point it clicks.
It clicks, but it's also, and it's just a thing I want to unpack a little bit that you said before, that there are tweaks. There are different things you do based on personnel. And so clearly in this case, you have brought in a system, but you've adopted to the fact that 6 of your top 7 minute getters are returnees. You brought in Jocelyn Tate, and we'll talk about that and why that matters so much to have that kind of continuity from Bowling Green. But these are players you inherited. So what is that process like? Are you breaking down film and saying, "Gee, I see that that Moira is able to do something more here than she's doing," because her numbers in particular have obviously gone to, another level, doesn't even begin to describe it.
Yeah, well, some of it too is opportunity. A lot of them are getting more opportunities than they have in the past. And some of that is because they've earned it. Some of it's because of the way our team and roster is made up, but the opportunity piece is a big piece of it. And the other part is not only are we systematic about what we teach and how we teach it, but we're systematic about what it looks like to get better. So fortunately, I was at Division II 10 years. So when you're at Division II, player development is really important. At Division II, there's not 5 stars coming ready-made to just go change the game. Now, granted, I coached a lot of really good players at that level, a lot of All-Americans, but the player development piece, and most of my staff actually was in Division II as well. So the player development piece has been deeply ingrained in us of what it looks like to get better. And I don't care where you start, everybody has an ability to improve.
Yeah.
And a huge part of improving is if you shoot the ball better, right, the game is easier for everybody. Um, and we don't need to make tricky shots, but you got to be able to make shots. And so we spend a lot of time too with what it looks like to have a plan to be a confident, consistent shooter. Okay. And then with that, right now, offense, the things we do become a little easier too.
I mean, good shots and where you're taking them and finding them, it's hard to find a shot chart. And again, I understand that this may not be what everyone enjoys the most, but what I love in my spare time is looking at shot charts. And so the fact that you guys have 6.6% of your attempts from the mid-range per CBB analytics is just, it's glorious. It's something comparable to, frankly, of all the coaches we've had on the program this season, I think Utah is only close, and you're even ahead of Utah and what Lynn Roberts is doing over there. And Lynn's had years to put that system into place. How do you go about doing that? At practice, is the floor electrified between the 12 and 18-foot mark? Like, how do you kind of ingrain that in players? Because you've done it and you've done it so quickly.
Well, some of it is just our offense too. The shots we get are at the rim or from three or free throws. And we can feel, however, I think analytics are important. I don't think they tell the whole story, but they're an important part of the story. They're an important part, I think, of adjustments and context. And so, if you look offensively, that matters. Like the type of shots you get matter. And the game has changed dramatically with the 3-point line. That's a big difference. But a lot of it is just our offense generates shots in those spots. And they're just better shots over the course of the entire game. Granted, I think there's some really, really good mid-range players. I think the higher up you go, that shot becomes a little more important because of the size. You look in the WNBA, there's just so much size and rim protection. So I understand the importance of it, but it's also just a harder shot, and it's not worth a lot for being a harder shot. So a big part of it is really just kind of what the type of shots our offense creates. And I love that you shared about Utah because they're a team that I've paid very close attention to. I'm actually pretty good friends with one of the assistants, and they're someone I've watched a lot of film on because I really appreciate the way they play. And the way they generate good offense through team basketball. So definitely some similarities and a team that I've admired and learned a lot from.
Also a fascinating watch and something that I really enjoyed was getting to see. They came east. We were able to see them up close last month, as a matter of fact. But to go back to the results that come along with it, you guys are 4th overall in offensive points per possession in the nation. And you're doing it against, some of the most difficult defenses day in and day out. So, you're on quite a run. We're recording this on Thursday, January 11th. So we're doing it ahead of that game at Ohio State coming up this weekend. And you are on quite a run, having won 5 of 6. I just want to point out, because it's the one game that you didn't win, but I feel like it was so instructive. And it was that game against Iowa. And so that game is 76-73. If you had asked anybody coming in what that game was likely to be, we all would have said in the 90s, right, on both sides because of the offenses that they have. And I wonder what you saw defensively out of your team, what it means there, and kind of where you need that to be. And just to kind of preface it, when I've talked to Lisa Bluter in the past with Iowa, she's always talked about, all right, we're going to be a top 5 offense in the league and a top 5 offense in the nation. We need to be top 50 defensively, and then we're going to be contenders to be the national title winners or near or close to it, the way she was last year. What are your metrics like defensively, and what did you see in that game that led you to believe you could get there?
Well, Iowa is such a tough matchup for so many reasons, obviously, particularly with Caitlin Clark, who, in my opinion, I think is the best player in the history of the game on the women's side. And so we put a lot of energy into the defensive end that game, and I actually thought we had a very choppy offensive game, and kind of did some unrealistic things, especially in the first half. We turned it over more than we normally do on some just kind of silly plays. But defensively, we had a very, very specific game plan for them. I think they require that. I think both teams knew how important it was to take away transition. So, I think we were both hustling back, and neither team really got much in transition, which has been, important for both of us offensively. And it ended up being more of a grind out in the half court sort of game. But there are some things that we felt like we had to take away. Iowa offensively is so dynamic that they're hard to keep up with from just a scoring perspective. So defensively, I thought we gave ourselves a chance to win. And what I challenged the team with afterwards is, okay, I thought against Penn State offensively, we were dialed in, and defensively, we weren't at a high enough level. Then we go into the Iowa game, and I thought defensively, we were at a high enough level, but offensively, we kind of lost some energy. So it's like, all right, we got to do it on both ends. That is required in this league on both ends of the court, night in and night out. But yeah, interesting game. It was both much slower and much less points in transition for both teams in that game.
It is fascinating. I have to point out as a point to our listeners. Oh my God, so many turnovers. You had 15, which is a lot for you guys, but is not a lot for most other teams in America. Like, I think you've only had more than that once.
Second quarter, we had these crazy turnovers that just led to easy points for them. So those were frustrating.
That is fair. I know, and the live ball turnovers will keep you up nights. I know that as well. So it's fascinating. They're on that final play, and we'll get to it more right after this break. But Moira Joyner did everything she was supposed to do on that play. I want to talk about her, both sides of the ball, right after this. But first, Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by Jace Medical. Now, look, I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but let's just talk for a second about preparing for real life so you can escape safely. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if one member of my family got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from life-saving medication they needed. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, and more. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. Go to jacemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. So back with Coach Robyn Fralick of Michigan State. And so I want to focus on that play, not because of the Caitlin Clark part. And you're right. Caitlin, not getting a lot of publicity, but I think, sort of an up and coming player who has a chance to do some good things in this game. But, getting to 40 points. And again, you guys held her to 40 points. I know that sounds odd, but on 34 shots. I mean, you guys did the job.
Yeah.
And even in that final play and making that shot from the logo, perfectly defended. At that point, you tip your cap to a player of Clark's caliber. But for Moira to have that type of defensive energy in that moment. There's just a couple of things that she's doing that I don't think people are necessarily paying as much attention to here in what is year 5. And one of them is that she's doing the Elena Deladon thing. She's 50, 40, 90 right now. She is absolutely beyond efficient on the offensive side of the ball. And then the other thing she's doing, and obviously she's a fundamentally different player from Elena, but the other way that the shape of her game statistically is very similar is she's single digits in turnover percentage. Elena, of course, the all-time WNBA leader in turnover percentage. And I just wonder what has allowed her to make this type of leap forward. She's obviously been one of the most successful players in program history coming into this, but these numbers are far and away beyond where she was even last year as a really established part of this team.
The best way I can describe Mo is she's a winner. And so I think when you have that mentality, one, you get better, and you focus on things that help your team win. So I think even if she heard those things you just shared, she'd have no idea. And we ask her to guard the other team's best player a lot. We ask her to create a lot offensively. Obviously, she's been a dynamic scorer while taking good care of the ball. And you just can't teach experience. I think you learn so much. She's been through sort of the grind of the Big Ten. She's always up for the challenge. But I don't think that she doesn't worry about those things, which is why I think it allows her to be successful. She has a plan. She's a kid that's in the gym consistently. And then honestly, whatever it is in a game that could help us win, she's up for. So much of being successful is worrying about the right things. And usually when you worry about the right things, good things happen.
It clearly is the case that she buys into what you guys are doing overall. Her effective field goal percentage, as I said, it stands out, but it doesn't stand out that much on this team that's top 5 in the country when it comes to that. Just in terms of like a pure shooting regimen that you talk about, having her in the gym all the time, having folks in the gym all the time, how much do you typically want your players shooting? What's like the day-to-day reps like for that, and how important does that play a role in you guys? It's one thing to get the good shots, but it's just you guys, every one of your teams knocks them down.
Well, I'd say most of our kids have about a 20-minute shooting plan every day. Nothing about it has to be crazy. Almost all of them are in the gym 20 minutes before we start practice or before we go to film. I'm grateful for a coaching staff that loves to be on the court. Like I shared, we all came up from the Division II level. So when you come up from that level, you're used to being the coach, the rebounder, the bus driver, whatever that looks like. So I've got a coaching staff that loves to be on the court with the kids. And I think when kids know that the coaches want to be on the court, they get on the court more. But yeah, I'd say for most kids, it looks like a consistent 20-minute plan. At this point, it's never about volume, just about being sharp. Like we had a kid in the gym the other day who made 5 threes in a row from 5 spots. And that means that's good, right? That means you're shooting the ball well, and that's enough.
Yeah.
And get into practice. So, culture, we talk a lot about culture, and there's so many pieces that go to it. But I think one thing that's under talked about is in good culture, there's just good systems, right? There's good organizational systems of what every day looks like. What does shooting look like? What does lifting look like? What does pre-practice look like? So we've worked really hard to create systems so our kids can thrive in those.
And then bringing Jocelyn Tate with you from Bowling Green, having her come and join Michigan State. How useful is that as a coach trying to implement a new system, to have somebody who was steeped in the culture where you just came from? And is that even a conversation you're having with her ahead of time, or is that something where you just understand that's going to be part of the package deal when she comes?
Well, she's such a special kid, and as much as she's such a versatile, that kind of dynamic player, and really fits in the way that we play. She can guard a lot of spots. She creates a lot. The bigger thing is she is a wonderful kid. She is a wonderful kid, and she brings a real joy. She's fun. She's funny. She's silly. So she brings this joy and this lightness to what we do every day. And then she's been a bridge, obviously coming in with a new staff, and there's everybody's sort of trying to figure each other out, especially when you first are working together. And I think she's been a great bridge for the team and for the staff of what this looks like and what it's about. And obviously, we really wholeheartedly believe in her, and she wholeheartedly believes in us. So we're really glad she came.
It's obviously at some level a disappointment for you guys last year not to reach the NCAA tournament at Bowling Green. You guys made a great run. You ended up losing in the WNIT to a team that I am certain should have been in the NCAA field in Columbia.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the part about mid-major. That's the that is the heartbreak piece. Is you pretty much have to win the tournament. It comes down to 3 games, regardless of how the body of work over the course of the season.
We could probably have a long discussion about why I think that is outmoded thinking and should be a whole other reset for how the NCAA tournament operates, of course. But I'm sure at some level you feel okay about that and feel differently here now at the Big Ten. And so when you think about this team, and again, we talked about, not knowing what you had in year one, we've got a statistically significant sample now. We're 15 games in. We see what a team like Michigan State is able to do. Do your goals for the season change? And is the NCAA tournament the thing you're looking at, either whether it's something you're talking about consistently or just on your mind, in the back of your mind, understanding that you got to keep players focused on game in and game out? I just wonder sort of how you navigate that.
We're just so process oriented. I think you can zoom out a little bit. I think zooming out helps you to remember how to zoom in, right? Like big goals help you to remember daily goals. But I think the thing that the team has talked about the most, and this has come from them, is the NCAA tournament. That's something that they have that is important for them. That is definitely something as a program we have talked about. But the reality is there's so many games that go into that. There's so many nights that go into that. And so you've got to be able to zoom out on that being important, but zoom in on, okay, what does that look like today, right? What does that look like? What does that look like in the details of today?
It is fascinating to see how those details of today are playing into the long legacy of success that you are continuing at Michigan State. So, Coach, I appreciate your time here. Thank you for sharing some of those insights into us. And to our listeners, of course, thank you for joining us as you do every day. We will be back with you tomorrow, as we are 6 days a week. Until then, I am Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful day.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.